now.
These are the times that try men's souls. The government is corrupt. The political system is dysfunctional. Both political parties have not only failed us, they have betrayed us. We cannot trust them with our futures. We, the people, must take back control ourselves. Good evening. Welcome to the Revolution. And welcome to Revolution Television and Revolution Radio. My name is Lawrence Hebron. Before we get into tonight's news commentary, I want to make a scheduling announcement. First, Revolution Radio will be joining Revolution Television on the American Eagle Alliance website, which is AEA4USA.com. Again, that's AEA, the number 4, USA.com. You'll be able to continue to hear and see our program every week. However, this will be our last episode on Blog Talk Radio. We've had a number of people tell us that they often have trouble logging in to hear the program, whether it's live or an archived version of it, and that the audio is often very poor. So we wanted to do better for all of you. We want to make sure you had the opportunity to hear our message, and so we've made the changes that I just mentioned about switching over to AEA for USA. That's the easiest way. We're on other venues as well, but that's the easiest way to get to us and hear us. Second thing, the live program will be done on Wednesday, or rather on Monday evenings, so you'll be able to hear us on AEA4USA.com starting earlier in the day on Tuesdays, and hopefully that'll be a little more convenient for some of you. Again, this is the last program, the program of March 9 and 10, is the last program that Revolution Radio and Revolution Television will be doing on Blog Talk. So from now on, please go to AEA4USA.com. And now, our revolutionary look at the news. First, a bit of a review and a chance to toot our own horn. 3 weeks ago, we reported on a brewing revolt in the state of Alabama over a federal ruling that the state must allow homosexual marriages even though most of its citizens, like the citizens of most other states, objected. Despite this, the officials of most of the counties in Alabama refused to comply with the federal judge's ruling. In response to this rebellion, the same U.S. district judge who overturned Alabama's ban on homosexual marriages followed up by ordering a rebelling county to issue the licenses anyway. Well, just last week, the Alabama Supreme Court ordered the state's probate judges to stop issuing marriage licenses to homosexual couples. This is getting interesting, and we want to commend the Alabama Supreme Court and encourage it to continue its bold stance. As we pointed out in our commentary on the issue about 3 weeks ago, a correct understanding and application of the Constitution conclusively proves that there is no constitutional right to same-sex marriages. And if they are to be allowed at all, it should be the decision of the individual states, not the federal government. So stay true to your rebel roots, Alabama, and we'll stay tuned to what happens there over the weeks to come. Second, last week we reported on the criminal incompetence of the Obama administration for divulging pretty much all the details of its planned attack on ISIS savages who now hold Iraq's second largest city, Mosul. The administration's briefing literally broadcast to the world, including our enemies, where we were going, when we are coming, what will be the size of the attacking force, who will constitute that force, and, by piecing all those bits of the puzzle together, how we are likely to attack. And then told them they have 2, 3, or maybe more months to plan for our arrival. We then wondered why Mr. Obama didn't just mail them a copy of the operation order. Just send it to ISIS headquarters. Make it easier for them so they don't even have to listen to the news reports from the Pentagon. Well, shortly after our report, Pentagon officials admitted that the release of information amounted to a mistaken disclosure of military secrets. You think? Well, we're glad that someone in the administration finally acknowledged a mistake, although it seems that the word crime would be a better way to describe it, since so many lives and so many billions of dollars are at stake. But is that where it will end? Actually, probably. This administration is notorious for not assigning accountability nor assuming responsibility for its transgressions. But I think it'd be a safe bet that if the Bush administration had done this, Senator Obama would have had a field day with it. Well, our third issue, and an opportunity to crow a bit, will lead into our first headline of the night. Back on November 11th, 2014, during comments on the results of the recent election just a week prior, I said, quote, "Republicans are rejoicing, Democrats are despondent. But what will happen as a result of this reshuffling of the Congress and state houses? My prediction? Not much. Election Day 2014 was a victory for the status quo, which means that things will keep getting worse." Now, I know that's not what you want to hear, but how can we expect anything else? The Republican and Democratic parties constitute the political tag team that has run this country for over a century and a half, and they have run it into the ground. They created this mess, and yet they are offering nothing new to fix it. And if you look honestly at the signs, they all argue what I just predicted. Things will continue to get worse. The Democrats, the grand strategists of America's decline, haven't changed their tune. They just tried to put some distance between themselves and the foul odor that wafts from their inglorious leader, Barack Obama. The Republicans, they didn't run for anything. They just cashed in on Obama's offensive odor. That's pretty weak, given our current circumstances. But at least it would be something if they would just put up a fight. But the Senate Majority Leader in waiting is already making noises about working with instead of decimating the Democratic administration. And so we're back to the same old, same old. The pendulum of power no longer swings. It just mildly slows its course in one direction, as ostensible power is passed back and forth between the Democrats and the Democrats' light. And if we can refer to the electorate as a body, it too remains unimpressed. Well under half of the eligible voters cared enough about their options to show up at the polls. It's as if they were saying, why go to the effort if the effort won't make a difference? The handwriting is on the wall, and it reads, "Neither the Democrats nor the Republicans have what it takes to save America." And so I stand by my prediction of last week. Nothing of substance will change in America as long as we rely on the Democrats and Republicans to change it. End of quote. Well, the news report that I'm about to give you makes me feel like something of a prophet. Headline: Homeland Security Bill heads to Obama with no strings attached. Last week, House Republicans abandoned their efforts to use the bill to fund the Department of Homeland Security in order to force concessions from President Obama on immigration. They sent him the bill to fund DHS throughout the remainder of the fiscal year with no strings attached, no conditions whatsoever. As you may remember, last fall, many Republicans campaigned on promises to stop Obama's immigration initiatives, which relied on improper executive orders rather than on constitutional legislation. House Speaker Boehner promised to fight, quote, tooth and nail, end quote, against the president's illegal moves. The Republican strategy sought to hold hostage funding for DHS pending a retreat by Obama on his immigration initiatives. But when Obama held fast, the spooked Republicans wet themselves and ran off to cower in a corner of the Capitol until they could dry off a bit. Capitulation, defeat, more of the same, just as predicted. It was a major victory for Obama and his party, who showed once again that the president's pen is mightier than the Constitution, at least as long as we look to the Republican Party to be its defender. Now the routed Republicans admit that they never had a viable plan and have no more moves to make. If you're surprised by this, then you've got to get with the program and join the revolution. Nothing less will work. Now, at this point, I'd like to turn things over to Ian McDonald, my partner here, but he's on a secret mission that I'm not at liberty to talk about. All I can tell you is it apparently involves gunpowder, so we'll just leave it at that. But I had some things here we wanted to talk with Ian, talk with him about. Now, the Republicans admitted that they have no moves to make on this issue. So we have to ask whether or not that might be a pretty good assessment of their chances on other areas as well. Remember, they promised us that once they got control, if we would just give them control of Congress, even though we didn't have the White House, even though they didn't have the White House, I don't want to be included in that we, even though they didn't have control of the White House, they could stop Obama, they could reverse a lot of his initiatives because they would hold the power of the purse strings. Here's their first chance to use it. Look what they did. They didn't fumble the ball, they threw an interception. So what hope is there going to be of stopping Obamacare or limiting Obamacare or stopping the ATF from outlawing the most popular ammunition for American rifles? Huh? If they failed on this one, why should we expect that they're going to do anything different? So I ask all of you, what do you think the chances are of ever solving these problems as long as we have to rely on two-party politics to get the job done, especially when those two parties are the Republicans and the Democrats? And here's one more sobering thought to chew on for a while before we move on to our next story. Obama is generally regarded in the international community as a weakling, a pushover, a doormat. And yet, the Republicans can't even make him flinch. So what hope is there that they can make the kind of tough decisions and carry out the kind of decisive action that needs to be taken in order to rebuild America the Great? I know that some people get a little squeamish when we use the term revolution, but do you honestly think that anything less is going to get the job done? Headline: California announces changes in sales tax. Now, I know that the specifics of this case just apply to the state of California, and in fact, just to certain counties and cities in the state. But I think the trend is probably pretty universal across the nation and will apply to a lot of your states as well. So hopefully this report will be relevant regardless of where you live, especially the conclusion of it. Now, I just a couple of days ago received a special notice from the State Board of Equalization, which is responsible for the collection of sales tax here in the state of California, the Golden State. Now, since the American Eagle Alliance does sell items which are subject to sales tax, the Board of Equalization, the BOE, wanted me to know that the tax rates in certain counties and cities were changing as of April 1st. I guess they wanted to make sure that they got all 19 ounces of their pound of flesh. Well, as I looked over this special notice, I saw a disturbing, although completely unsurprising trend. 36 of the 37 listed communities noted an increase in their tax rate. In one case, by a whopping 1.5%. In another, by 1.25%. In some others, by a full percentage point, and others by lesser amounts. There was only one community in those 37 that listed a change. Only one community, the city of El Cajon in San Diego County, which lowered its rate, although, get a load of this, it was from an already abusive 9% down to a still very abusive 8.5%. So we have to ask, and I think this is probably true for all of you across this country, where will this all end? Tax rates and the number of things that are taxed just keep increasing. Even those so-called temporary increases designed to meet some special need almost always end up becoming permanent. So again, we have to wonder, where will this all end? You've already lost control of about 60 to 70% of the income that you earn. We did that analysis on a previous show. Maybe we'll bring that up again sometime. But when you look at not just taxes, but the way the government influences the money that you have to spend, they're in control of about 65, 70%, maybe more, of the income that you earn. And it's only getting worse. So when are we finally going to stand up and say enough is enough? You know, the tax rate in New England, according to one scholarly report, back in the time of AR1, the first American Revolution, was about 1 to 2% of income. 1 to 2%. And we went to war over that. Now it's about 65, 70%. And we're sitting here doing nothing. Well, what can we do? In AR2, I offered a very simple 4-part plan to cut our taxes and keep them cut. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details again tonight. We've done that in past episodes of Revolution Radio, but I will briefly summarize these 4 steps. Very, very simple, and it would lower our taxes, give you back control of the money that you earn, fund the government's necessary functions, not all of these other unnecessary functions. Step 1. We limit the number of things which each level of government can tax to 1 or 2 items. Items like income, property, sales, utilities, etc. For example, maybe the federal government derived its income from income tax, the states from sales tax, the counties from property tax, the cities from utilities, excise taxes, things like that. Point 2, limit the amount of the tax rate. So not just limit the number of things that they can tax, but put a cap on what they can take. For example, income tax, put it at a flat 8 to 9%, something like that. Sales tax might be around 5%, 4%, whatever. Point number 3, forbid the government from going into debt. This is just stealth taxation. This is just forcing the future to pay the debts of the present. And number 4, require the government to fully fund everything which it mandates. This is another sneaky way of imposing stealth taxation. Instead of getting the taxpayer to pay for it, they get the consumer to pay for it. It's still coming out of your pocket. And it's still a way for the crooked politicians to buy the votes of other people using your money. So again, just a quick summary. 1, we limit the number of things which each level of government can tax to 1, maybe 2 things. 2, limit the amount of the tax rate. 3, forbid the government from going into debt. And 4, require the government to fully fund everything that it mandates. And then I won't go into it tonight, but we did have a plan. What about an emergency like a natural disaster or a world war? We had a plan for that too. That would still keep things under control. So, think about that. Next, headline. Fatal flaws in Obama's Iran nuke deal. An avowed enemy of the United States and one of the world's greatest sponsors of global terrorism is building the infrastructure to create nuclear weapons and the intercontinental ballistic missiles necessary to deliver them worldwide, including our own homeland. Now, it kind of sounds like the storyline for an implausible international suspense thriller coming to a theater near you. If only that were true. This, my friends, is real. This is a nightmare getting ready to crash into the real world. Certainly, our administration, sworn to protect us from terrors like the one I just described, is on top of this and ready to unleash decisive measures to nullify the threat. Again, if only. Nope. The Obama administration, true to form, continues to live in a Pollyanna world of its own imagining and is planning to make nice with the brutal dictatorship in the hope that it will forget about all its claims that we are the great Satan and its decades-long chants of death to America. This president makes Neville Chamberlain look like a tough guy. Well, let's look at some of the details of Obama's plan to deal with Iran and their nuclear ambitions. Now, granted, the details of the plan have not been finalized yet, but they have been floated out there. We have really good information that this is exactly what Obama is considering, although there's been so much flack that has come out as a result of this that we might see a few changes. But as it stands right now, this is what he's considering. And I want you to ask yourself, why would any sane person, especially a person who has the interests and well-being and security of the United States of America at heart, why would he consider any of these issues? Okay, first point. Iran would be allowed the right to enrich, thereby granting them permission to spin thousands of centrifuges enabling them to continue processing nuclear fuel closer and closer to weapons-grade material. Second, Iran would be allowed to continue construction of the Arak plutonium reactor, which is one of the best sources for developing this nuclear material that can be spun into weapons-grade material. Third, international inspectors that have been successfully stonewalled in the past would have no assurance that they could do any better in the future. Fourth, sanctions designed to punish the regime for non-compliance would be lifted, and the Iranian economy would flourish, providing ample funding for the ongoing development of nuclear warheads and the devices to deliver them. And what's more, fifth, Obama has apparently knuckled under to Iran's demands that any restrictions on its nuclear program have a time limit, probably around 10 years. After that, it's no holds barred and full speed ahead on the path of global nuclear jihad. Oh, and if the prospect of Iran having nuclear weapons isn't scary enough, they're also well on the way to developing their own intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs. In fact, some reports indicate they may already have them or be very, very close. Now, for those who believe the Ayatollah's swill about a peaceful nuclear program, let me point out to all of you that you don't need ICBMs to launch grenades. Their sole purpose is to deliver a nuclear payload a very long distance, like to America. Could this picture and the inherent dangers be painted any more clearly? And yet Obama either can't see it or he isn't concerned. And that's got to concern us, because this is the man we have entrusted with the responsibility of keeping us safe. So we've got to ask, what the heck is up with this guy? Why would he even consider such insane proposals? I'd hate to think that he is deliberately trying to endanger the United States and its citizens. But how could anyone be so gullible as to trust the Ayatollahs, or so reckless as to think that they could be restrained with such meager measures? You know, a few years ago, I watched an excellent presentation by the Claremont Institute called 33 Minutes, which is the time it would take for an ICBM launched from Iran to reach us. Even a modest-sized bomb exploded at the proper altitude over the middle of the United States would create such a massive electromagnetic pulse, or EMP, that it would fry most of the critical components used to maintain our national electric grid. We don't stockpile enough of these components to replace all the ones that would be destroyed, and it would take a few years to rebuild enough replacements to get the grid up again. Of course, this EMP would also knock out everything from your bedroom alarm clock to the electronics used on commercial aircraft. The results of a single well-placed warhead would be devastating to the United States, crippling us for years and making us vulnerable to aggressors. Why would any national leader allow anyone to approach such a capability, to even come close? And yet, Obama goes so far as to flirt with the prospect. How do we explain this? That's something you need to ask yourself. And as ugly as the answer might be, again, I urge you to be a PCSI, political crime scene investigator. Where does the evidence take you? Well, that's our revolutionary look at the news. Now we want to go into This Week in American History. We at Revolution Television, Revolution Radio believe in America the Great. We are proud of our heritage, and we like to remember that and encourage a reconnection with our proud heritage. So every week, a regular portion of our program is to review events that happened in our history on the dates of this last week. Some profound, some kind of whimsical, everything in between. That's America. So let's go back one week to March the 4th. March 4th, 1789. March 4th, 1789. The United States Constitution took effect as the first session of Congress met in New York City. 1791, Vermont became the 14th state. 1837, the Illinois legislature granted a city charter to Chicago. In 1861, Abraham Lincoln was inaugurated as the 16th President of the United States. And 4 years later, in 1865, Abraham Lincoln delivered the second inaugural address just weeks before Lee's surrender at Appomattox Courthouse. 1933, Frances Perkins became the first woman to serve in the cabinet of the United States. She served as President Franklin D. Roosevelt's Secretary of Labor. On February 26, 1993, we reported on this last week, February 26th, a terrorist bomb went off in the underground basement of the World Trade Center, killing 6 people. Well, on this date, March 4th, 1 year later, 1994, 4 terrorists were convicted of the crime. Moving on now to March the 5th. On the night of March 5th, 1770, a crowd of colonists, disgruntled over the imposition of British taxes, we talked about that before, they gathered around the Royal Customs House and began to taunt British guards, whom they called lobsters because of their red jackets. The soldiers fixed bayonets, and the colonists responded by throwing snowballs, trash, and oyster shells at the Brits. The soldiers opened fire, killing 5 Americans. Word of the confrontation spread fast, and it became known as the Boston Massacre. John Adams was asked to defend the British soldiers accused of murder. Now, no lover of the British regime, Adams still took the case anyway, determined to prove that every man deserved the right to a fair trial in an American courthouse. The verdict? 6 of the 8 were found not guilty. 2 were convicted of manslaughter and were branded on their thumbs. 1868, the United States Senate organized into a court of impeachment to decide the charges against President Andrew Johnson. Johnson was acquitted by a single vote. The only other president to be impeached was, as you probably know, Bill Clinton. 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt declared a bank holiday to keep panicked depositors from withdrawing their money and causing banks to fail. Of course, if you didn't have a fractional reserve system, you wouldn't have to worry about that. 1946, Winston Churchill made his famous Iron Curtain address at Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri. March 6, 1836, a Mexican army overwhelmed the defenders of the Alamo. 1857, in Dred Scott versus Sanford, the United States Supreme Court ruled that blacks were not citizens, that Congress could not prohibit slavery in United States territories, and that Scott could not sue for his freedom in a federal court. So there's some hope there for all of you who think that if a Supreme Court decision has been made, that's it, end of story. Nope, not true. 1930, Clarence Birdseye began to sell prepackaged frozen food in Springfield, Massachusetts. It was the forerunner to the TV dinner. 1951, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg went on trial for spying for the Soviet Union during World War II. March 7, 1876, Alexander Graham Bell received a patent for the telephone. 1897, Dr. John Kellogg served the world's first cornflakes to patients in Battle Creek, Michigan, hoping that a better diet would help cure some of their ailments. 1926, the first successful transatlantic radio telephone conversation took place between New York and London. 1933, while the bank holiday mentioned above was still in effect, Charles Darrow, a businessman from Atlantic City, New Jersey, got a trademark for his new board game called Monopoly, world's longest game. 1945, U.S. troops crossed the Rhine River at Remagen and established the first Allied beachhead in Germany during World War II. March 8th, 1796, the United States Supreme Court ruled on the constitutionality of an act of Congress for the first time in Hilton versus the United States. Prophetically, the court upheld a carriage tax. And so it began. 1817, the New York Stock Exchange was formally chartered. 1965, United States Marines landed near Da Nang to secure an air base. They were the first U.S. combat troops to arrive in South Vietnam. In 1983, President Ronald Reagan referred to the Soviet Union as an evil empire. We've got plenty of those going around still today. It'd be nice if somebody would at least declare them so. You know, there's somebody I'm talking about. March 9th, 1847, United States forces landed near Veracruz and laid siege to the city during the Mexican-American War. 1862, the age of the ironclad warships began. The Confederate ship Virginia, which was previously known as the Merrimack, wreaked havoc against the wooden Union ships blockading the port of Norfolk. The North quickly dispatched its experimental ironclad, the Monitor, and the next day, March 9th, the two duked it out for more than 3 hours. They both limped away at the conclusion of the battle, and each side considered the encounter a draw. 1945, U.S. bombers dropped incendiary bombs on Tokyo, causing a firestorm that engulfed much of the city. In fact, when the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima months later, initial reports blamed the destruction on another incendiary attack. And now here's one for all you sports car enthusiasts. 1964, March 9th, the Ford Motor Company produced its first Mustang. March 10th, 1785, Thomas Jefferson was appointed minister to France, replacing Benjamin Franklin. 1848, the United States Senate ratified the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, ending the Mexican-American War. 1864, Ulysses S. Grant was promoted by President Abraham Lincoln to command all the Union armies. Now here's an extra credit question for you. What does the S in Ulysses S. Grant stand for? I'm not going to give you time to Google this. You either know it or you don't. Answer is Simpson. Simpson, Ulysses Simpson Grant. In 1876, Alexander Graham Bell succeeded in sending words over a telephone wire. He said, "Watson, come here. I want you." And that is our dates in history. While the program was going on, a message came in, a question. What do you think about the political choice of Putin against the USA and the United the UE in Europe? What do I think about the political choice of Putin? Well, I'm not sure exactly where they want me to go with that one, but it would be nice if we had a leader as determined as Putin. I certainly don't agree with his philosophy and his ideology and his political objectives. He's just, as far as I'm concerned, a reincarnation of a Soviet imperialism. But at least the Russians have a leader. At least they have someone who's bold. At least they have someone who will protect their nation and advance its interests. I wish we could say as much. Well, if you're getting tired of the same old, like we were talking about before, if you're getting that sinking feeling that neither the Republicans nor the Democrats have a clue about how to fix what they've broken, you're right. And if you're looking for another alternative for dealing with that problem, the American Eagle Alliance. The American Eagle Alliance is leading the charge in fighting the Second American Revolution, AR2. And among other things where we can help you out, we conduct Patriot Training Days that will teach you and your organization how to fight and win the Second American Revolution in less time than it took to win the first, without taking over the White House, the Congress, the Supreme Court, or any constitutional amendments. And we hope peacefully. But frankly, that's up to the other guys. You know, we have a way to peacefully save this nation. Whether it stays peaceful is up to them, but we will be prepared to do what's necessary by the ballot or the bullet. See, that's exactly the decision we made back in 1776. In 1776, we rocked the world. We weren't going to take it anymore. We'd had more than enough abuse, and we weren't abused back then nearly as much as our own government has been abusing us now. Well, In 1776, we rocked the world. I think it's time to do it again. So call us. We will give you a plan. Again, it sounds kind of fantastic, kind of out there that we can do this, but after just a half hour or so of detailing this plan, people are on board. They understand the power of it. It is not a rehash of tired old ideas, failed ideas from Republicans and Democrats. It's vintage American, and it's as old as 1776 and as new as tomorrow. It's historic and heroic, and it will change everything. So if you'd like to schedule an event for your area and its Patriot organizations, call 909-913-7878. Again, area code 909-913-7878. Or if you'd like for me to come and discuss any of the issues in Solutions, Guidebook for Rebuilding America the Great, or AR2, Handbook for the Second American Revolution, go ahead and call that number as well, 909-913-7878. Remember, you can turn to AEA4USA.com and see past recorded episodes of Revolution Television and Revolution Radio, and as well as many other items of interest to the Patriot community. We talked about Solutions and Guide and AR2. They are most easily available for most of you through Amazon. Just search for it under my name, Hebron, Hebron, and yes, they are available. We have bulk rates for quantity purchases, and we've had a number of those, so thank you for that. Again, just call for that. Don't go to Amazon. They don't handle the bulk purchases. Again, call 909-913-7878. Well, again, we like to wrap up with a quote or sometimes quotes of the day. After giving you several the last couple of weeks, we've toned it down to just 2 today, but they kind of apply to some of the things that we've been talking about. So our first quote of the day: think what evil creeps liberals would be if their plans to enfeeble the individual, exhaust the economy, impede the rule of law, and cripple national defense were guided by a coherent ideology instead of smug ignorance. P.J. O'Rourke. So the question is, how much of that is tongue-in-cheek? You think maybe there isn't a coherent ideology out there trying to accomplish all of those things? We've been talking about that on Revolution Radio many times. And our second quote, going back a long time: every battle is won or lost before it is ever fought. Sun Tzu. Since Obama doesn't even anticipate a battle with Iran, where do you suppose that leaves us? Who do you think is already in this battle? Well, thanks for listening to us. Tell your friends they can listen to archived episodes on AEA4USA.com. We hope to talk with you again next week on Revolution Television and Revolution Radio. Now, let's get cracking, Patriots. We've got a country to save. Good night. Thanks for listening.